and Cogmate taught master's program. This is a kind of a recent graduating cohort, so you can see by the numbers, smaller class sizes obviously than a lot of undergraduate courses, but the cohorts are getting up to about 150 or so students now. And I'm a PTF there, so I teach accounting on several of the accounting papers that these students will take. And our structure is slightly different in terms of the teaching per week. So we have an hour-and-a-half lecture, a 2-hour tutorial, and a 2-hour team-based learning session, like a workshop. And typically, when the students specialise, there's probably about 60 or 70 in a class. And what I find, what is really striking is a lot of the accounting students, they come in, you ask them, why have you chosen accounting? Well, because I'm good at maths. And I don't like writing or talking to anyone. I'm only partly joking. Some of them actually say I'm good at maths and I just want to sit in a room and do some sums. So I've chosen accounting. That seems like a good option. And from what we know, certainly from the profession and everything coming out about the working environment, the number, okay, you have to be comfortable with numbers, but communication skills will be your key selling point is communicating complex information simply and effectively to a variety of audiences. So that's what we've been working with, and that's what I've been working with Ailsa on.
Kia ora tata, my name is Ailsa and I work very closely with Ruth. I'm in the business communication team. And as you can see, there are 3 of us in the business communication team, and we provide embedded support for the students, as you can see in this cohort. So roughly in the business masters, there are about 400 students altogether. This is a typical demographic. Many of them, 85 to 95% of the students are from international backgrounds. That doesn't mean that they all have English as another language. Some of them may have English as their first language. But we, in the business communication team, we provide embedded support for their communication skills and for developing their academic literacies. So this is where Ruth and I work together on, I do seminars with the students, and we work together to work on aspects of the course that may develop further their communication skills. So that leads us nicely on to the element of the graduate profile that we're going to focus on today, which is communication and engagement skills. And so we've highlighted, as Rhiannon did, the aspects that we are focusing on, that the graduates will be able to work effectively in teams and to engage diverse audiences by communicating professionally using multiple formats. And in particular, and this is where the business communication team, slightly different model to everybody else's, to give detailed descriptions of complex subjects engaging diverse audiences. So, for example, I work with a glossary of terms for the accounting students, and in my seminars we will practice giving descriptions of this to a non-specialist audience, where they have to provide an example and use their English to explain what the word is and what it means to somebody who is not, for example, a client who's not familiar with those terms. We also focus on building rapport either with the clients or their managers, and formulating ideas and opinions with precision. So those are the terms of the graduate profile. So one of the things that I focus on with the students whenever they're communicating, whether it's in a spoken format or written, is they have to have the purpose of the communication in their mind, think about the context and the audience, and that determines the content and the language and the communication that they will use for that purpose. So I'll pass on to Ruth now to tell you about the first example that we worked on together, demonstrating written communication skills.
So this paper is a financial reporting paper, and it's an example from a tutorial, and this week's subject, accounting for assets. So by this point, the students have already attended a lecture which has covered the majority of the theory around accounting for assets. And the original tutorial, before we changed it, followed a very similar pattern to most tutorials. So small written scenario-based questions on impairment of assets. What would you do in this situation? What would a customer do in this situation? So you have to apply the knowledge from the lectures to that situation. So the students generally discuss and complete these exercises in small groups. I would probably have maybe 30 in a tutorial group, so I appreciate that's like smaller than some of the undergraduate tutorial groups, but to give you a sense. And then I would debrief the question by calling on some groups to say, what would you do, what would you recommend, and we do a verbal debrief. So that was the design of the kind of the original tutorial structure. And in this, although I'm talking and we're debriefing, there's a bit of verbal communication, but we wanted to try and improve the way that they're communicating in the session. So I talked with Ailsa about how we might make it a little bit more communicative.
So we wanted to see how we could make the learning deeper and how to get the students more involved. And naturally, if they actually do something with the language and with the context, then we feel that they will be engaged more in what their task is, which is. So the new tutorial is very similar. The similar written questions incorporated into a Skype message. So the students were required to, they had 15 or 20 minutes to interpret the information in the Skype interview and then determine the needs of the client. So the context is, Ruth is going to tell you the context before.
Yes, so it's the same information in a message, but we contextualized it a little bit, put it in a Skype context, and then the students had to email the client in reply. So the technical content is the same, but the format and the way that they're presenting it is slightly different. They still work in the small groups of 2 or 3. Then they emailed me live in the tutorial, in my inbox, what their reply to the client was. And then, as I'll show you later, I then debriefed that live in the class. So I selected 1 or 2, anonymized it so I didn't show them my inbox. I kind of cut and pasted it into Word, and we pulled it up and said, well, okay, let's have a look at the technical content, but let's also have a look at what you're saying, how you're topping and tailing the email structure, how you're building a rapport with the client at the same time. So they're replying kind of live to me in the tutorial. So we're going to show you an example, and the star of the Skype, might like to show you, he's available for a small fee for recording services, a member of staff acting in here.
So my role in it was formatting an email and working out what the context, the purpose, and the audience is, so that determined the tone of the email, particularly the beginning and the end, where they have to develop a rapport with the client. So this is the client, Kevin, from Kevin Kempin Motors in Kaikoura. Whoops.
No, it's the, yeah.
Good morning to you. I'm hoping to leave a message for Ruth, who is my client manager. She knows about the case, but just in case somebody else needs to take over, I'm Kevin Kempin from Kempin Motors in Kaikoura, and I'm preparing my accounts for the year end 31st of March 2017. And I've just got some questions about how to account for some earthquake damage that I've had. So just to give you the context, I'm not using my premises anymore because the road leading to it was blocked by a landslide. So I'm renting a property in the town. As you hopefully remember, the premises was worth around $500,000. So I want to sell it, but I don't think it will be worth more than, say, $200,000. Now, I did place an insurance claim, and I've got my insurance payout, and that was $180,000. So I have that amount, and I'm not sure how to account for that either. So I really need some help on this. So if you could get back to me as soon as possible, I'd really appreciate that. Thanks very much.
Okay. So she goes to the word. Okay. So the students, I had to play that a couple of times, obviously. So students are listening and they're picking out information, and they've had the lecture already on impairment of assets. So they should be thinking, this looks like an asset impairment. What am I going to have to do? What am I going to have to say to Kevin? And they started to compose some emails. So on the left is one of the emails that I chose to show to the class, and on the right is the one, obviously we kind of edited it live, but I don't have time to quite show you what I've done. So on here in yellow is what we ended up with as an agreed version in the class, but what we might send to the client. So this is an example the students came up with originally. So, hi Kevin, it's a bit kind of friendly, and there's exclamation marks and things like that. So we kind of professionalised the first part a little bit. And we also, whoops, sorry, we also did that. We also then said, you know, you're trying to build rapport with the person as you're doing this. So I know I'm debriefing technical content, but you're going to have to say who you are, which they failed to do in this email. Who are, Kevin's asked to speak to Ruth, you're obviously not Ruth, so explain who you are, and maybe also sympathise a little bit with the situation, because you're communicating in a business way, and I know he has asked you some technical questions, but you also need to be able to top and tail the email professionally as well. Probably the biggest change actually is the change to the technical content, and this is the bit that the students were most uncomfortable about. So although it looks like they've come up with a very detailed email on here, basically they cut and paste this from the lecture notes, stuck it in, changed the numbers, and then kind of sent it on. So that's where it comes from. And then when we changed the language here, we simplified it a lot. And we discussed Kevin, and we said, what does he really wants to know, bottom line, what's his loss for the year? Let's think about his. He doesn't really need to know about all the impairment calculator. I know you know this and you're desperate to put it on the page, but really you've got to unpick that and think about empathise a bit more with Kevin. So we worked together to reformat that email in the class.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll just debrief now. Okay. So after this, Ruth and I got together and we said, well, what was the learning from this? How did it work? How did the students perceive it? And we thought the video was quick and easy to produce, thanks to Kevin. Locked him in the office and locked the door. The students liked it because it was an authentic, semi-authentic, and the aspects of the live editing on the screen that Ruth did. And then we brought that back to the seminars that we did in the business communication team and worked on, as Ruth said, the topping and tailing of the emails so that they had a more communicative aspect that was more realistic. The students were really engaged in the task. And even though there was less content, so less is more, really sometimes we felt that was really beneficial for the students. And also in the end of course evaluations, the comments were really positive around the realistic examples of teaching. So we thought the next time, because this took quite a lot of time in Ruth's tutorial, that maybe more time could be given to the email. Maybe getting them to set the Skype listening in advance, and then they come and do it in class because it's fairly time-consuming. And in terms of those of you who have larger groups, we thought maybe they draft a response and then just a couple of groups send the actual emails, which could be live on screen. So we felt this was a very good example of that deep versus surface learning, where they're really engaging with the topic, engaging with the vocabulary, the context, the audience, and the content of what the message was the client needed, what they needed, and how to respond to that. So it was more of a learning in order to understand what the signs signify. So Ruth's going to tell you about this second, and this is an oral communication task.
Yeah, so again, in the accounting syllabus, slightly different subject this time, financial statement analysis. So this is looking at equity valuation, company valuation. And we had an original assignment that we actually really liked and were happy with, but it took a long time. It took a lot of staff time and a lot of marketing time, and we were looking at it as a way of how can we get the same communication but simplify the delivery. So that's why I wanted to share this one with you. So the assignment had two parts, and part A remained the same actually in the change. So they're preparing some PowerPoint slides about Air New Zealand. So the situation is they're an equity analyst and their subject specialism is Airlines in New Zealand, and they've got a new manager who's come in and they're new to New Zealand. So different to the Kevin example, this person is financially literate, so they can communicate using complex financial information, but what they're trying to do this time is communicate context around a particular company. So they're preparing a presentation for their manager. So part A was to produce the slides, not deliver them, because we had too many students. So this is the problem with communication, to actually mark and deliver that many PowerPoint presentations. So we had a part B, and we enrolled a friendly member of the accounting and finance department. So poor Stephen King volunteered to act as the manager, and we set up these elevator pitches where the students had 2 minutes to summarize a presentation to their manager. The scenario was the manager didn't have time to read the presentation. They saw them in the lift and they said, can you just summarize it, just like that. I don't know if the students liked it.
They were very
nervous about it, because obviously we couldn't really do a real elevator pitch thing without jumping out at them from pushing them in a lift. So they did sort of pre-prepare it a little bit, which made it slightly less authentic. But it was a good experience for them, I think, in terms of, and the key skill we wanted is summarising things, like a verbal executive summary is what we were after. And it worked, but it took a lot of time. So we had to have Stephen acting as the manager, I was there, we also had to be all marking it live with rubrics, so it just took a lot of staff time. So in the new assignment, what we did instead was set this as a voicemail assignment. So they didn't meet anybody physically. The same scenario, they got a message by the manager saying, my Wi-Fi connection is really bad, I can't get your presentation, can you leave me a 2-minute message summarising everything in your original part A. And they had 24 hours to deliver the second part. So and they just submitted audio files on Canvas. So same exercise, but a lot quicker and easier to deliver. So we've got an example for you of one of the submissions, and this is the marking rubric that we used to mark the communication skills. So we'll play.
So we're going to play a very short part of this one, and we'd like you to just take a couple of seconds to look at the rubric and see whether you can give it a possible grade according to this one. It's 2 minutes. The task was a 2-minute audio recorded voicemail.
Hello, James. This is Charlie from the Equity Analysis Department. To generally summarize the presentation I sent to you, Air New Zealand is at a strong financial situation with a loyal customer base and established social reputation. With its brilliant in-flight services and airpoint program, Air New Zealand has generated steadily growing revenue from customers and has earned over 30 awards in the last couple of years, including Safest Airline of the Year. Socially, it has effectively incorporated sustainability to most of its activities and shifted to more fuel-efficient operating fleets.
So with the person next to you, we'd like you to spend 20 seconds and see if you can analyse that particular audio file in terms of the rubric. Okay, we'll give you 20 seconds. Okay, thank you very much. That's 20 seconds. So any comments about the merit of the student's audio file? What do you think?
We were on the left.
On the left, on the excellent.
We were on the left. Yeah, that's as much as we're prepared to say.
It's a little bit difficult to know without having the subject knowledge to know how much of what they were saying was necessary. But that caveat, say somewhere between excellent and good, I think, for all three of the dimensions there.
Yeah, and then this one was one, because I agree, I obviously had their actual presentation as well, and I knew what content I was looking for, but there were other things that we practiced with them in terms of really condensing it down, not trying, the ones that were less good just reeled out numbers constantly for a 2 minute. It was just really hard to listened to. So when we gave feedback, we gave a couple of individual lines of feedback and then gave collective feedback to the class around leaving effective messages. And this very difficult message for students is when you communicate, you have to take a lot of things out. And they found that very hard. But
can I just ask a quick question? Was there any thought of feedback given on their slides? So I say that I crack slide presentation.
Okay.
And I set up to do a crack elevator.
No, because this was part B of the same assignment, and part B had a 24-hour notice period, so we basically we marked them in conjunction with another, but it's something to consider.
Yeah.
In addition to the generic feedback, do students have exemplars where they heard different?
That's, I suppose, Ailsa worked a little bit in her seminars about how to leave an effective voicemail message. We didn't do it for accounting, but we did it generically, so they would have some.
And I guess with the same with the email, that topic entailing sort of developing that relationship, maintaining that relationship, a little comment at the beginning and at the end, which is what they didn't do when they did the elevator pitch, because they were so nervous they forgot to say, hi, what are you doing here? Or, some kind of communicative content. So the end of this was, I don't know if I can get there. No.
Yes, sorry.
Hello, James.
Oh, sorry.
Strong position in the area.
That was my communicative skills. I just wanted to make a point because I have some knowledge of the programme.
Yes.
Just to say that because it's a holistic curriculum, these skills are developed across courses. So by the time they come to this course, they will have had other opportunities to practice and get formative feedback because the curriculum is seen as one holistic.
Yes. Yeah, good point. Thank you.
So we'll just quickly move on to what our appraisal of this. So we thought what went well was it was much easier to mark. There were fewer resources. There wasn't anybody else employed in this. They just did it directly sent it to on Canvas to Ruth. It's another way to present information rather than email, but it kind of developed and built on their previous skills. There was good feedback from the students. They preferred it to the previous one. It wasn't quite as nerve-wracking, but it's trying to make the voice more natural on a voicemail. Really, that was hard to do for some. What could be improved? Ruth and I thought that maybe leaving a voicemail message to set up the assignment would authenticate. Thank you. So students could respond to that. So that was modeling it for them, and also leaving audio feedback comments instead of written comments may be more effective and may have exemplified it more. So we'd like to conclude our presentation after the two tasks that we've demonstrated, and with the 4 E's that Susan talked about earlier. We'll start off with the Excite learners.
Starting off with Excite, the learners really, I'm not just saying, they really seem to engage with these assignments and tutorial ideas, whether it's excitement, but certainly they were engaged and interested and viewed it as a useful thing for their future careers, even if not for the accounting syllabus in particular.
And we thought that exploring new concepts, so there are different ways to maintain a relationship with a client, and communicatively, they could do it orally or written, but we felt that they were exploring different concepts in those two tasks.
And in terms of extending their thinking, with both of these tasks, we're trying to get the idea of empathy. So when you're communicating, who are you communicating to? And changing the content and the tone accordingly. So you may have the technical content, but the skill is how you communicate that to others.
And finally, we thought this was a very good way of demonstrating their capabilities, communication-wise, in the two tasks. And the information which Ruth said at the beginning is really, really important in an accountant is the false premise that they have about not being communicative as an accountant. But there are so many ways now that they have to communicate with clients, with their bosses, with their managers. And we thought this was really exhibiting their capabilities in that field. So with that 4 E's, we'd like to conclude the presentation. Thank you.